Good afternoon, students of Chinese YMCA Secondary School. We are now going to play you the news clip from yesterday.
If you want to survive Hurricane Irma, leave now. That's the dire message Florida authorities used to complete one of the largest storm evacuations in U.S. history. This after Irma killed 22 people in the Caribbean. Fierce winds are now whipping Florida as Hurricane Irma creeps closer to areas too dangerous to stay.
This is your last chance to make a good decision. More than 6.5 million Floridians have been ordered to evacuate. Do not put yourself or your family's life at risk.
This message sent Floridians fleeing to safer grounds. Residents queued up for hours in snaking lines.
We'll all get through this together. I'm here as well. I was displaced as well, so I'm right here with you.
But with just 320 evacuation centers throughout the state, many were turned away.
We're stupid. We should have come to the shelters a day or two ago.
Irma is expected to strengthen to Category 5 when it makes a direct hit on Florida. That still wasn't enough to evacuate the stubborn.
This is the western view over the beautiful Gulf of Mexico. I'm not that worried about it because a hurricane damage is primarily water rising, and I'm on the 17th floor.
This expert breaks down Irma's expected path.
Here's what we look for as far as the landfalls. It's going to be sometime Sunday morning in the Keys. It will continue during the day, moving in sometime in the afternoon into the evening hours, west central Florida. And during its whole path, we are talking about the threat of tornadoes.
Zookeepers in Miami scrambled to secure as many animals as they could, while larger ones were kept in their hurricane-proof enclosures. Earlier, as Irma packed winds of 200 kilometers per hour, it uprooted trees and ripped apart homes in Cuba. St. Martin is one of the worst hit. Countless residents have been rendered homeless. Right after France's president held an emergency meeting, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe promised to send troops to help the French territories of St. Martin and St. Barthélemy. Officials in London are doing the same for the British Virgin Islands.
But in total, we have some 500 troops in the region by tonight, and we have 2 to 3 flights now going out each day, bringing further troops, further engineers, medical support, pallets of aid.
Right as Irma pounded the U.S. Virgin Islands, Navy sailors rescued patients in need of emergency care.
The first Taiwanese charged with subversion of state power in the People's Republic of China will stand trial tomorrow. Li Mengche's wife finally made her way to the mainland after a previously failed attempt to see the activist who has been detained since March. Elmi Lung reports.
Li Qingyu was swamped by the media as she arrived at the airport. Many were curious to see if she could check in successfully this time. In April, she cancelled her trip when mainland Chinese authorities revoked her travel permit just hours before her scheduled departure. She's now 2 flights away from her husband, Li Mengche. The activist will stand trial tomorrow in Hunan province. The 42-year-old used to work for Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party, which leans towards the island's independence. He conducted online lectures on Taiwan's democratization and managed a fund for Chinese political prisoners. He went missing in March after leaving Macau for Zhuhai and was later charged with subversion of state power, the first such case involving a Taiwanese. The Taiwan government has appointed a lawyer to accompany and provide legal advice for Li's wife. Of course, we'd like to attend the trial, but from what I know, we've been given a smaller court this time, he said. Before embarking on the cross-straits trip, Li Qingyu asked supporters to forgive her husband. That's if he says something against his will in the open hearing, which may disappoint them. Since the activist went missing, his wife has appealed to U.S. President Donald Trump for help and approached the United Nations, which set up a panel to investigate Li's disappearance. Elmi Long, TVB News.
Now, turning to local news, a member of the government-backed panel on land supply has praised Chief Executive Carrie Lam's proposal for a scheme on starter homes. This one aims to help young families get on the property ladder. Our Rachel Lung with details.
Buying a flat in Hong Kong isn't getting any cheaper, but it's not impossible either. Under the administration's new approach, young families may be able to get on the property ladder with the help of a new starter home scheme. The proposal is expected to be the highlight of Chief Executive Carrie Lam's first policy address next month. Speaking to TVB News, a member of the Task Force on Land Supply, Lo Chung Kong, said the plan would target locals who are not eligible for public housing but cannot afford a flat in the private sector.
You need, first of all, to attract the right group of people to go into this. And then, after they have been living there for a few years, if they have the affordability, they then move on to the next tier, to the private sector.
So how would this work? The city's leader earlier proposed a public-private partnership scheme to allow private developers to build the starter homes. The surveyor praised the plan, saying that it may open up doors for future land supply in the city.
You'll be able to see that, the prime target could be agricultural land, which is suitable for, residential use. If certain land parcels have been able to be identified, and then to get through the town planning, infrastructure constraint, go through the land premium process, then there will be supply of this new type of development land.
Currently, under the city's existing subsidized housing sale program, the home ownership scheme, HOS flat owners can sell their units freely in the secondary market after paying a land premium based on the amount discounted from the original purchase price. Lau suggested that since these new starter homes are likely to fetch a lower price than HOS flats, there should be limitations on the resale of these starter units. Rachel Lang, TVB News.
Protesters marched to Government House this morning, demanding universal retirement protection. Meanwhile, the Labor and Welfare Chief says the city will be hit hard as the population ages in the future. Caleb Long reports.
Around 100 members from the Alliance for Universal Pension took part in today's protest. The rally started at Cheung Kong Center in Central and ended at Government House. The protesters demanded Chief Executive Carrie Lam introduce a universal retirement protection program in her upcoming policy address next month. They said with its huge fiscal surplus, the government has the ability to introduce non-means-tested universal retirement protection. The group also slammed Lam for refusing to meet them, despite having sent her numerous invitations. Meanwhile, Secretary for Labor and Welfare Law Chi-kwong addressed the problem of an aging population today. Law stated in his blog that the population of people aged 65 or above was 1.2 million in 2016, according to latest government figures. That figure is projected to reach 2.6 million by 2066. But he admitted manpower for primary elderly care is sorely lacking at the moment. Law noted that the problem of an aging population in Hong Kong will be severe in the future. He even described the problem as a tsunami. He said the government is currently preparing for October's policy address and the allocation of resources for the upcoming year. He promised his bureau will try its best to fight for resources to improve elderly services. Law also noted that as the local labor force is shrinking, the Labor Department will introduce measures to promote elderly employment in response. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Overseas again, Rohingya resurgents have declared a month-long unilateral ceasefire starting today. The move would enable 8 groups to help ease a humanitarian crisis in northwestern Myanmar. Wave after wave of hungry and traumatized Rohingya refugees from Myanmar continue to pour into neighboring Bangladesh. This follows attacks by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, insurgents on 30 police posts and an army base on August 25th. The Myanmar military's subsequent counter-offensive has forced nearly 300,000 Rohingya to flee to Bangladesh, with another 30,000 non-Muslim civilians displaced inside Myanmar. Over the past fortnight, thousands of homes have been burned down, dozens of villages uprooted, and thousands of people are still on the move towards the border with Bangladesh. The growing humanitarian crisis has strained aid agencies and local communities, already helping hundreds of thousands displaced by previous waves of violence. It led the insurgent group to declare a month-long unilateral ceasefire. In a statement, the ARSA encouraged all concerned humanitarian actors to resume their assistance to all victims of the crisis. The group, which has been branded a terrorist organization by the Myanmar government, also called on the military to lay down arms and allow aid to all affected people. The move comes as the ARSA struggles to put up significant resistance against the military force unleashed in Myanmar's northwestern Rakhine state. Rights monitors and fleeing Rohingya say the army and Rakhine Buddhist vigilantes have mounted a campaign of arson aimed at driving out the Muslim population. Meanwhile, aid workers say a serious humanitarian crisis is also unfolding on the Myanmar side of the border. Red Cross organizations are scaling up their operations in Rakhine after the United Nations had to suspend activities there following government suggestions its agency had supported the insurgents. Thousands of people displaced from Rakhine have been stranded or left without food for weeks, with many still trying to cross mountains and dense bush to reach Bangladesh.